Get out! There is no place for you at this wedding. Stay away from me. Don't let your cheap smell stain me.
Get out. There is no place for you at this wedding. Stay away from me. Don't let your cheap smell stain me. Lily, just that one sentence was enough to make my entire world collapse. I, Evelyn Carter, 52 years old, a dark-skinned American woman who raised her son with my own two hands, never imagined that on the most important day of his life, I would be treated like someone shameful in front of everyone. I stood frozen, my heart squeezed tight. Why did my future daughter-in-law hate me that much? Why did Michael, the child I love more than myself, not see the cruelty right in front of him? That was the moment I realized this story held far more darkness than I ever expected. Thank you for staying and listening to my story. Let me know which state you're watching this video from in the comments below. I am Evelyn Carter, 52 years old. A dark-skinned American woman whose eyes carry more shadows than shine, yet still hold the last trace of pride life hasn't managed to steal. 20 years of being a single mother was never easy, and the calluses on my hands are proof of the sleepless nights and the long days rushing through 3 bus stops just to make it to work on time. I was never wealthy, never comfortable, never belonged to a luxurious world. But every time I watched my son grow little by little, I told myself, I may not be rich, but my heart is big enough to raise a child into a decent man. That belief has never changed, no matter how harsh life became. Back then, Michael was everything I had. He was the reason I woke up, the reason I endured. And one late afternoon when the sunset filtered through the old kitchen window, Michael hugged me, his voice trembling with joy. "Mom, I want you to be proud of me on my wedding day." My heart bloomed and tightened at the same time. Unexpected joy, raw and sincere. I never imagined this moment would come so soon. In that second, every sacrifice from the past 20 years felt repaid by a single gentle blessing. I held him for a long time, afraid the moment would disappear if I let go. I hoped life would finally ease up, that another woman would join our small family, bringing the warmth I had been missing through all those lonely years. But sometimes light is only a warning that a storm is approaching, and I had no idea it was waiting just around the corner. When Michael took me to meet Lily, I still held on to that fragile excitement. Lily was beautiful, youthful, elegant in a way that made the small cafe feel like a stage designed just for her. I forced a natural smile, tried to keep my hands from trembling as I reached out. She smiled back, lovely but cold, her eyes scanning me like she was assessing value. "I hope we get along within the necessary limits," she said softly, her tone light but sharp as a thin blade. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine, not from the weather, but from something in her smile, something familiar, something I had seen in people who looked at me like I was worth less. A faint sense of dread flickered like a faulty light bulb, hinting at a storm creeping closer. I tried to stay calm, to think positively. My son was happy, and I wanted that happiness to be real. But when I watched Lily lean toward Michael, whisper something that made him laugh, something in me cracked just a little. A feeling I couldn't name, half unease, half a quiet ache, like seeing the shadow hiding behind the thin layer of light I desperately wanted to believe in. I didn't know then that this small moment would become a prophecy for all the tragedy that followed, and I had no idea my life was about to twist into a path I never imagined. After that initial meeting, I tried to convince myself that everything would be fine, that Lily was simply a little proud, that I just needed time to understand the girl my son had chosen. But life rarely gives me the luxury of self-comfort. The first cracks appeared so quietly, it felt accidental, yet sharp enough to cut straight through anyone's heart. The first wedding meeting happened on a Sunday afternoon. I stayed home waiting for Michael to call for my input because he had told me he wanted my opinion on every step. I waited until dusk when the last rays of sunlight slipped off the kitchen window and left the room in a dim gray. My phone stayed silent. Only when I opened social media by chance did I see a picture of them meeting at a small restaurant downtown. I called Michael asking why he hadn't told me. He sounded flustered, then handed the phone to Lily. She spoke sweetly, but her tone was cold underneath. "Oh, we thought you were busy. The meeting's already over." A soft sentence, but I could hear the intention beneath it. The way she lingered on you made me feel pushed outside the frame of my own family. I stayed quiet for a moment, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside me, something cracked, a small sound, but impossible to ignore. The next day, I brought the guest list I had spent several nights preparing. A few old friends, some neighbors who helped me through difficult years, people who had watched Michael grow up. But when I handed the list to Lily, she glanced at it and placed it down like an unnecessary object. "This list doesn't fit the vibe of my wedding." The air thickened around us. Vibe, a fancy word I never cared about, suddenly became a weapon to erase the faces that had been my second family. I saw the contempt in Lily's eyes. Not blatant, but the kind that comes from someone convinced they belong above others, and everyone beneath them is nothing but clutter to be cleaned away. I looked to Michael, hoping he might speak up, but he only smiled lightly as if Lily's comment made perfect sense. That hurt more than I expected, though I forced a small smile of my own to avoid tension. I didn't want conflict, not when their wedding was near, but it seemed my efforts were invisible. Later that afternoon, I mentioned gently to Michael that I felt a little left out, not blaming, just hoping he'd understand his mother a bit. But he sighed and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't be so sensitive, Mom. Lily just wants everything to be perfect." A simple sentence, but it created a distance I didn't know how to cross. It wasn't just reassurance, it was alignment, and I was no longer on that side. That night, I stood in my little kitchen, the same place where I had cooked countless meals for the two of us. Michael used to tell me everything, ask for my thoughts, share every plan. Now, with just one gentle yet loaded comment from Lily, I felt myself being pushed aside. I wasn't angry, just empty. Those cracks might seem small to others, but to me, they carried the weight of 20 years of unconditional love. Standing under the soft yellow light, I felt something slipping away from me. And I began to fear that this was only the beginning. I kept trying to convince myself that the small fractures from before would heal, that if I endured just a little longer, everything would warm up again. But life is never that gentle with me. What happened next felt as if someone had wrapped their hand around my heart and squeezed until it could no longer beat properly. That afternoon, I stopped by Michael's house to give him a box of keepsakes I had saved over the years. Old photos, childhood items he once treasured, things I thought might be useful for the wedding video. The door was slightly ajar, so I stepped inside without knocking. I called his name, but no one answered. As I walked toward the living room, I heard Lily's voice. At first, I assumed she was on the phone, but then I froze as her next words rang out clearly. "I don't want some dark-skinned country woman ruining my wedding." Each word hit like cold metal against my skin. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was deliberate, dripping with contempt. I stood there still clutching the box, as if letting it go would shatter the 20 years of my life stored inside it. I don't remember how long I stayed in that spot. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. I never expected such words to come from someone who was supposed to join my family, someone my son loved, someone I had been trying so hard to welcome. It felt like being slapped in the face under bright lights with nowhere to hide. I stepped back, then again, swallowing the sharp pain rising in my chest. In my mind, only one question echoed again and again. Why do they see me as a burden? I never thought of myself as elegant or sophisticated, never claimed to belong to the glamorous world Lily adored. But I also never believed I would be viewed as something so filthy that my presence alone could tarnish their wedding. I had spent my entire life shielding Michael from cruelty, yet now the person he loved was the cruelest one of all. I wanted to leave immediately, to run before I heard anything worse. But as I turned around, Michael walked through the door. He saw my face, eyes full of confusion, and asked what was wrong. My throat tightened so much I could barely speak. I told him what I had heard. Michael stood silent for a moment, then let out a soft sigh and placed his hand on my shoulder, the same gesture as before. "She just slipped up, Mom." That sentence cut deeper than Lily's insult. To him, a slip of the tongue could excuse a comment attacking his mother's skin, her origins, her dignity. To him, it was something forgivable. When he said those words, I realized the last support I had been clinging to was crumbling. I looked into my son's eyes and saw the distance forming between us, like a widening crack that could never be sealed. He had chosen Lily's side, and the ease with which he dismissed my pain told me I was slowly being pushed out of his life. I left Michael's house without another word. The air was cold enough to make my hands tremble, and the sky dim enough to blur the edges of the street. But in that darkness, I understood something with painful clarity. What I had overheard was only the beginning of something much worse waiting for me. After hearing Lily's cruel words and watching Michael defend her so blindly, my mind felt unbearably heavy, as if someone had placed a stone on my chest. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to think positively, to believe that everything would pass. But sometimes the things we try hardest to hold together are the very things that hurt us most. I returned home feeling unsteady, my emotions falling into a bottomless pit. That entire night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying every word I had heard. I thought about Michael, about how easily he dismissed what Lily said. I thought about Lily's eyes and the way she looked at me as though I didn't belong in her world. The more I remembered, the deeper the pain cut. The next morning, as the first light touched my living room window, my phone vibrated. It was a notification from the wedding planning group chat I had been added to just a few days earlier. I opened it, and the first message on the screen froze me in place. Evelyn will sit at the secondary table so it fits the photo layout better. Just like that. No explanation, no second thought, no courtesy. They had assigned my place as if I were an unnecessary prop that needed to be moved away to avoid ruining their perfect pictures. I read it again and again, my hands slowly turning cold. A secondary table meant being separated from the family, pushed aside, treated like a side character in the most important event of my son's life. I had never expected to be honored, but I also never imagined being placed where distant acquaintances and irrelevant guests sit. I stayed frozen on the couch, staring at the phone screen while my heart clenched painfully. The humiliation washed over me in a wave so sharp I felt it physically. I wanted to cry, but the tears didn't fall. Maybe I had endured alone for too many years. Maybe I had grown used to swallowing things whole. In that moment, I asked myself, what did I ever do wrong except to love them? I had spent 20 years raising Michael on scraps of salary. I had opened my heart to welcome Lily as a daughter. I had helped with the wedding from day one, finding venues, calling caterers, booking decorators, and even offering my savings. Yet in return, they were determined to erase me from the picture. As that truth settled in, a strange clarity washed over me. It felt like a thin curtain had fallen away, revealing the truth I had been resisting. They had never seen me as part of their plan, and if I kept quiet, they would keep stepping on me as if I had no worth at all. I stood up, phone still in hand. My heart was hurting, but beneath the hurt, something else was awakening. Not anger, but a kind of awakening born from long suffering and the refusal to accept more. I remembered the nights I stayed up working overtime, the days Michael cried for a father he never had, the moments I hid my tears so he wouldn't see me break. I had fought all my life to protect my little family. Now I realized I had to protect myself from the very people trying to diminish me. If they don't see me as family, then there's no reason for me to support them anymore. The words left my lips softly, yet they felt heavier than any vow I had ever made. I didn't want to destroy anything, but I no longer wanted to be the shadow standing behind them, waiting to be dismissed whenever they pleased. I was done. In that moment, I knew everything had changed. Not because they pushed me out, but because I chose not to walk willingly into a circle of pain ever again. I no longer felt small in front of Lily. I no longer felt worthless in Michael's eyes. I realized my value wasn't defined by them, but by everything I had survived to reach this point in my life. And as I stood in my small house, I felt a sharp, undeniable sensation that my decision was about to become a turning point. Not only for the wedding, but for a chain of events I never imagined was coming. I never imagined I would be the one to bring down a wedding. I never thought I could push everything into chaos. But after that humiliating message, after Lily's cutting words, and after Michael's painful excuse on her behalf, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't explosive anger. It was a cold, steady clarity, the kind that appears only when a person has been pushed too far. I understood then that if I kept standing still, they would go on crushing my dignity as if it were worth nothing. I had endured enough, and the storm began the moment I rose from my chair, grabbed my purse, and stepped out into the fading golden light. My first destination was the wedding venue, the resort I had put a deposit on 2 months earlier. I remembered how I'd felt the day I signed the contract, proud and happy to give something meaningful to my son's big day. But today, walking through the reception hall, that feeling was long dead. I approached the counter, my voice calm enough to surprise myself. "I'm the one who signed the contract. I want to cancel it immediately." The staff looked startled and tried to explain the non-refundable deposit, but I didn't care. I didn't need the money back. I only needed to sever my ties. My name was the anchor of that contract, and I was fully within my right to remove it. Once the cancellation was finalized, I left the resort feeling as though a knot I'd carried for years had finally loosened. But that was only the beginning. A wedding needs more than a venue. It needs decoration, catering, flowers, photographers, videographers. I had arranged all of them. I paused outside the resort listing them in my mind, and with each name I remembered my resolve grew sharper. I took out my phone and dialed the first number. To the decorators, I said, "I want to cancel." I'm the payer. No refund needed, just cancel. To the catering service, I don't want my name attached to this wedding anymore. To the photographers, stop all services. I will cover the fees. Each call was like a gust of wind tearing at a house built on weak ground. Everything collapsed faster than I expected. I was no longer the Evelyn who swallowed her pride to keep the peace. I was the Evelyn from 20 years ago, the woman who rebuilt herself from ruins, the woman who refused to let anyone trample her life beyond the third time. I also knew that once the storm reached Lily, the impact wouldn't stop at shock. And just as I anticipated, Michael started calling me repeatedly only hours later. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear accusations or empty excuses. I wanted to see them face to face, to watch their real reactions when they realized how quickly everything had fallen apart. That moment came sooner than I expected. That evening, I went to Michael's house after he sent one last message asking me to come. The door opened the instant I arrived. Lily stood in the living room, eyes red, not from tears, but from rage. She glared at me as if I were the enemy she had been waiting to attack. Before Michael could say a single word, she stormed toward me, voice breaking into a full, vicious scream. "Get out! This wedding has no place for you. Stay away from me. Don't let your cheap smell contaminate me." Every word hissed through her teeth like flames touching oil, a release of every ounce of arrogance and hatred she had held back. I heard each sentence clearly enough to carve it into stone. In that moment, all of Lily's fake politeness evaporated. Her true self stood bare, cruel beyond anything I had imagined, and even Michael froze for a second in shock. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I didn't need to scream at her. My calm was enough of an answer. Because I knew one truth. Those who lose control are the ones who feel their world crumbling. Those who have to scream are the ones terrified of losing everything. Michael stuttered something, trying to pull Lily away, but I wasn't looking for comfort anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was simply done, truly done. When Lily kept spewing insults, I quietly turned and headed for the door, not to flee, but to end things. A wedding cannot survive when the financial pillar is removed, and I was that pillar. Without me, their plans were nothing more than pretty illusions on paper. I walked out of Michael's house without looking back. The night air was cold, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. I no longer felt trapped in a corner. The storm I had created wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. And I knew this was only the beginning of a battle I no longer intended to lose. From the moment I hung up on that call with Lily and Michael, it felt as if all the strength in my body had been drained away. I returned home in a silence so heavy it felt unnatural, as if the world had swallowed every sound and left me alone with nothing but my own breath. When the wooden door closed behind me, I stood there in the familiar room and suddenly felt like I no longer belonged to any place at all. I had lived here for 20 years, raised my child, worked, laughed, cried, yet for the first time, I felt completely displaced. I walked to the chair by the window where Michael used to sit and do his homework years ago. Now it stood empty, as if those years had never happened. I sat down and let my trembling hand rest on the worn table. Everything in the house was the same, but my heart was not. A whisper escaped my mouth before I could stop it. I just wanted to be a mother. When did I become the outsider? Hearing my own words stunned me. It wasn't just a complaint, it was a truth I had finally been forced to confront. I had loved wholeheartedly, stood as Michael's support through every storm, but now I was treated as if I was unnecessary, burdensome even. The pain spread inside me, not sharp like a wound, but heavy and slow, like something that had been festering for years without my notice. The late afternoon light spilled through the window, casting the room in a muted yellow-gray. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and opened the fridge without knowing what I was seeking. It was simply the habit of someone who had lived alone too long, filling silence with meaningless actions. But nothing filled the emptiness building inside me. Then the phone rang. The sudden sound tore through the stillness. I looked at the screen. Michael, my heart lurched. A small part of me still hoped he would say something, anything to pull me back from the edge. I took a deep breath and answered. His voice came through tired and tense. "Mom, you ruined everything." I froze. There was no concern in his tone, no apology for letting me endure Lily's cruelty, no hint of understanding for what I had gone through, just blame, cold and direct, a single sentence powerful enough to slash through what remained of my heart. I wanted to ask him what I had ruined, what wrong I had done by defending myself, but my throat tightened. I couldn't speak. Michael sighed again and continued, his voice low. "Lily is really upset, you know. You made things so awkward." Awkward? That was his greatest worry. Not that his mother had been insulted, not that Lily had spat cruelty at me, only that things had become awkward. In that moment, I understood the distance between us had grown far deeper than I'd allowed myself to believe. I hung up before he finished, not in anger, but because I simply couldn't bear another word. I set the phone down and the silence returned. This time, it didn't just surround me, it settled inside me. I walked to my bedroom, each step heavier than the last. When I sat on the edge of the bed, I felt my body almost floating, as if whatever anchored me had been cut loose. I lifted my hands to my face, and for the first time in a very long while, I cried. Not from rage, but from the realization of a truth I had hidden from myself. I had spent my whole life being mother, father, friend, protector. I had shouldered everything so long that I forgot I was human too, capable of breaking. And in the end, all I received was coldness, blame, and the sight of my only child choosing the side of the person who had hurt me so deeply. My voice trembled into the quiet room. Maybe being a mother was never enough. Hearing myself say those words hurt more than anything Lily had done. It wasn't just sadness, it was acceptance. I had believed that love and sacrifice were enough to keep my child close, but love is not always returned. Sometimes it simply becomes the reason people expect you to stand quietly behind them forever. I lay down staring at the ceiling with tear-blurred eyes. I don't know how long I remained like that. All I knew was an endless darkness spreading inside a place where hope no longer lived. No more Michael, no more Lily's shadow, just me alone with the weight of everything that had happened. And I knew with a clarity that chilled me that I had reached the deepest point of despair. But even in that lowest place, there is always something hidden, something pain forces you to finally see a truth waiting to awaken. That night, my house sank into a thick, suffocating silence, the kind that swallowed even the sound of my own breathing. I lay on my bed, eyes wide open, mind hollow after everything Michael had said. The despair was so dense that I could no longer feel the passing of time. It was as if I were falling into a bottomless pit, with no one reaching down to pull me out. And just when I thought I would drown forever in that darkness, a sudden sound echoed from the door. There was knocking. 3 slow, heavy knocks, as if the person outside knew I had already hit rock bottom and no longer had the strength to stand. I didn't know why I turned my head, my body still heavy as stone, but something urged me to get up. I opened the door, and standing under the porch light was a man whose shadow stretched across the ground. His face was partly hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat and the cloak of darkness, but his eyes were sharp enough to make me instinctively step back. He tilted his head slightly, his voice low and steady, each word delivered like a verdict. "Evelyn Carter, it's time you learned the truth." I held my breath. The way he said my name sent a cold shock down my spine. I had no idea who he was or why he had appeared at my door in the middle of the night. But something in his voice wasn't threatening. It felt more like someone delivering a message that could no longer be delayed. My heart pounded hard, but for the first time in days, despair loosened its grip just enough to make room for a surge of curiosity and fear. The man handed me a black folder thick with papers. His fingers were long and firm, the hands of someone who had done things ordinary people would never comprehend. He placed the folder in my hands, his voice still cold but not hostile. "This is what they've been hiding from you." I opened it right there at the doorway, my hands trembling so much that the pages rustled loudly. Inside were printed screenshots of messages exchanged between Lily and her friends. They mocked my skin color, laughed at my poor background, and even discussed ways to ensure Michael would transfer everything into Lily's name after the wedding. In one message, Lily openly said she would make him cut off contact with his mother a few months after the wedding to avoid ruining their image. Each line hit me like a blow. My shoulders trembled, not because I was weak, but because the truth was too cold, too clear, too cruel to let me cling to any illusions. Everything I had suspected was only the tip of the iceberg. Lily's disdain wasn't a moment of anger. It was deliberate, nurtured, discussed behind my back as part of a long-term plan. The folder also contained photos of Lily meeting with a lawyer, with a note attached, preparing documents to remove mother-in-law from Michael's assets. The world tilted. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a full-fledged scheme. I lifted my head, wanting to ask who he was, how he had gotten these documents, why he was helping me. But the man had already stepped back into the darkness as if he had never been there. Before his shadow dissolved into the night, I heard him speak one final sentence, soft as a breeze, yet cold enough to carve itself into my memory. Justice always finds its way back. Then he vanished. No footsteps, no sound, no trace. Only me standing on the porch with the heavy folder in my hands, my heart trembling with a chaotic mix of agony and a thin flickering light. Not hope in Michael or Lily, but hope that everything I had endured finally had an explanation. For the first time in days, I no longer felt entirely alone. A new door had opened, and whether it led into darkness or light, I knew I would walk through it with whatever strength remained in my heart. I spent the entire night reading through that black folder. Every page felt like a stab wound, yet it was also the evidence that pulled me from being erased from their wedding into the one holding the truth. I knew I could no longer stay silent. This wasn't only about me and Lily. This was about Michael, the son I had raised with everything I had. He deserved to know who he was about to bind his life to. The next morning, I called Michael. My voice was calm, surprisingly calm. I told him I needed to see him in person, that it wasn't something to discuss over the phone. He hesitated for a few seconds, then agreed. Maybe he sensed something approaching that he couldn't avoid. We met at the park where I used to take him when he was small. The trees were the same, the old wooden bench was still there, but the two of us were no longer who we once were. Michael arrived looking exhausted, tension clouding his eyes. As soon as he sat down, I placed the folder on his lap and opened it to the first page. I didn't speak. I let him read on his own. I watched each shift in his expression, from confusion to disbelief, from disbelief to horrified realization. His eyes widened page by page, his hand clenched tighter, veins rising beneath the skin. When he reached the audio recording section, I pressed play. Lily's voice echoed clear and undeniable. "Securing Michael is my financial future." I had never witnessed my son's expression change so quickly. His face tightened, his jaw locked, and his chest rose and fell as if holding back a storm. He said nothing. He only lowered his head, hand over his forehead, looking like someone who had just watched their life be unmasked in the harshest way. I sat beside him, feeling both pain and a strange tenderness. All the humiliation I had endured his past days didn't hurt as deeply as seeing my son crumble like this. I didn't comfort him because he needed space to face this reality. Michael lifted his head slowly, his eyes red. "Mom, is this real?" His voice cracked. I nodded. Before he could process it fully, Lily emerged. She must have followed him or believed she could regain control before everything spiraled. She rushed over, fear flickering beneath her attempt to stay composed. "Michael, I can explain," she said, voice trembling. "She set this up. She's jealous of me." "She's always wanted to divide us." I stepped back, letting the truth speak for itself. Nothing I said now was more powerful than what Michael had already seen. Michael looked at Lily as though he was seeing her for the first time. All the love, all the trust drained from his expression, leaving only a hollow coldness. "Set it up," he repeated, his voice low but cutting. "That's your voice in the recording. Those are your messages. That's you meeting with the attorney. And you want me to believe my mother created all of this?" Lily stumbled back, lips trembling. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. You know how people talk when—" But the more she spoke, the deeper she dug her own grave. Michael stood, stepping closer to her. His hand shook, not out of fear, but from anger held in too long. "All this time I defended you, chose you, believed you," he said, voice graveled with hurt. "And this is what you were planning." Lily burst into tears, reaching for his arm, but he pulled away instantly, as if her touch could stain him. I wanted to shield him from this pain, but he needed this truth. And then he turned toward me. His eyes softened, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me whenever he was scared. His voice wavered as he spoke. "Mom, you're the only one who has never hurt me." Those words pierced me deeply. Not because they flattered me, but because they revealed how much he had been blind to how much he had ignored and how much it cost him now. I placed my hand on his shoulder. I didn't need him to choose me. I just needed him to see the truth, to know I was never the enemy. All I ever wanted was for him to be protected, not used. Lily stood frozen several steps away, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. Her lips moved as if trying to find a final argument, but nothing came out. No lie could save her now. The storm she created had finally swallowed her whole. Michael walked away first. I followed, leaving Lily standing in the quiet park like a fallen statue. No screams, no dramatic collapse, just silent defeat. On the way home, Michael said nothing, and neither did I. The truth had exploded, leaving behind only the heavy sound of footsteps and the ache still lingering in both our hearts. But something had shifted. No more illusions, no more guessing. Every mask had been torn away, and at last Michael saw who had truly stood by him all along. After the truth was exposed, the house sank into a heavy silence. Michael sat frozen, his hand still resting on the black folder, his eyes lowered as if trying to piece together the fragments of his life. I sat beside him without saying a word. He needed time, and I didn't want to add even one more sentence that might push him further into confusion. When Michael finally stood up, something in his face had changed. He no longer looked like the soft-hearted boy who could be manipulated, but a man who had awakened, wounded yet resolute. He only said one sentence, but it was enough to tell me the storm had reached its breaking point. "Mom, I need to talk to Lily." I didn't stop him. This was something he needed to face alone. Michael drove to Lily's apartment immediately. On the way, he called to tell me he would handle everything before she had any chance to insult me again. I simply told him to do what was right. I didn't want him acting out of anger, but out of clarity for his own future. When he arrived, Lily was already packing, seemingly preparing to flee from the mess she knew was coming. Perhaps she believed that if she disappeared long enough, Michael would return to her like always. But when she opened the door and saw him standing there with a cold, unreadable expression, she froze. The fake smile she usually wore vanished instantly. Michael didn't let her speak first. He went straight to the point, his voice low and steady, which was far more terrifying than shouting. "I'm not marrying someone who disrespects my mother." Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. She let out a short, brittle laugh and approached Michael, trying to soften her voice like she used to. "Honey, you're confused. She's manipulating you. I'm the one you should trust." But Michael didn't budge. He lifted the folder, showing her the screenshots, the messages, the recordings, everything the Raven had delivered. "Explain this. Are you saying it's fake?" Lily's expression twisted into something desperate. She tried to laugh, tried to push the blame onto me, tried to pull Michael back into her control. "She set this up. It's her. She's jealous. She wants to break us apart." Michael cut her off. "It's your voice on the recording, Lily. You think I wouldn't recognize it?" She fell silent. The room went still, broken only by her uneven breathing. Then, suddenly, Lily exploded in a scream, her voice cracking into something wild. "No one leaves me! No one!" She grabbed Michael's arm, but he pushed her away harder than he ever had. Lily screamed until her throat was raw, knocking things off the table, stumbling across the room, then clinging to him again like someone drowning. "You can't do this! You owe me! You owe me for believing in me! You have to marry me!" But Michael's decision was unshakable. Something inside him had shattered, and with it, the illusion of the love he thought he had. His voice was calm when he spoke, painfully calm. "You don't love me. You only love what I have, and I'm not spending my life with someone like that." Lily collapsed onto the floor. For the first time, she was stripped of her arrogance, stripped of her sweet facade. She knelt there, shaking, her tears falling not from regret, but from losing everything she had tried to manipulate into her control. Michael turned away. The door closed behind him with a finality that left no room for hope. Hours later, Michael returned home. He sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. I placed my hand on his shoulder silently. He had lost someone he thought he loved, but at the same time, he had freed himself from a trap he never realized he was walking into. When he looked up, his voice was hoarse. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't see how much you were hurting. I didn't stand by you when you needed me." I touched his hand gently, feeling both pain and relief inside me. Sometimes the truth is the cruelest gift, because truth can shatter illusions, make us gasp for breath, but it also frees us from lies. And when Michael leaned his head on my shoulder, I knew that despite the cost, he had finally found his way back to what was right. Lily lost everything. The wedding collapsed, the relationship ended, and the image she tried to craft fell apart. She had played a dangerous game and lost completely. As for me, though, my heart was covered in wounds. A quiet peace settled inside me. After everything, I knew I no longer had to fight alone. When the hall door closed behind Lily, I thought that was it. The end of everything. The end of humiliation, heartbreak, betrayal. I thought that once the truth was exposed, everything would finally settle, and my son and I would return to each other the way we used to be. But some things, once touched by darkness, never returned to what they were. Michael came to my house the next morning. His face was tired but calmer than before. I heard the soft click of the door lock, then the familiar rhythm of his footsteps. When I turned around, he was standing there, eyes heavy with regret. He didn't speak at first. He simply walked closer and knelt before me like a child trying to return to the first light he ever knew. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't see how much you were hurting." His voice cracked as if every word hurt to say. I looked at the grown man in front of me, the same boy I once carried through storms, now trembling like he used to whenever he did something wrong and feared I'd be disappointed. My heart softened. The wounds inside me didn't vanish, but something warm eased the sting. I placed my hand on his head, soft but firm. "As long as you come back to me, I don't blame you anymore." Michael hugged me tightly, as though trying to mend the rift between us by sheer force. I hugged him back, yet a thin veil of unease lingered inside me. The reconciliation warmed my heart, yes, but like a weak fire fighting off a cold wind. Something felt unfinished, unsettled, as if the storm had paused, not ended. We spent the day together, cleaning the house, cooking dinner, sharing quiet smiles. Michael told me he was leaving the apartment he once shared with Lily, that he wanted to start fresh. I nodded, trying to trust him, trying to trust the peace returning to my home. But that night when I lay in bed, the silence crept back, heavy, watching, whispering that the story wasn't finished. A week later, returning home from work, I found a black envelope on my doorstep. No sender, no markings, pure, suffocating black. I picked it up with a prickling down my spine and opened it. Inside, a familiar, sharp handwriting glared at me. "Truth never stops. The Raven." A cold tightness gripped my chest. I pulled out the photograph inside. Michael and Lily, sitting together in a cafe. Not arguing, not fighting, talking. Their faces soft, composed, unbearably familiar. I stared at the picture so long my eyes burned. I flipped it over, and a second message carved its way into my bones. Lily has not retreated, and Michael is not innocent. The Raven. A chill slid down my spine. The fragile peace I'd accepted shattered like thin glass. I wanted, needed to believe in Michael, to believe he wasn't lying, that he wasn't hiding anything. But the photo was in my hands. The truth was in my hands. That evening, I didn't confront him, not yet. He came home smiling tiredly, thanking me for dinner. I nodded and served the food, but inside my mind, pieces of a puzzle began shifting, whispering, forming something I didn't yet understand. The next day, as I stared at the photo again, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and the voice on the other end froze my blood. Lily. Her voice wasn't shaky or hysterical like before. It was cold, precise, cruel. "You think you won. The game is just beginning, and standing beside me is your son." My hand tightened around the phone. My breath stopped. Before I could speak, the call ended, slicing the air like a blade. I stood there stunned, the phone dead against my ear. My heart raced wildly. Was it a lie, a trick, or the truth? I stepped onto the porch, the night air sharp and dry. And there, across the street, under an old street lamp, stood a figure. Long coat, dark hat, face hidden in shadow. The Raven. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak at first. He simply watched me, the same way a predator observes the first shift in its prey. When the wind blew, I heard his voice, soft, eerie, almost like a whisper, rising from the pavement. "The next move begins now." I stepped back, not because I feared him, but because I feared the truth he carried. The truth he hadn't given me yet. The truth he had chosen not to reveal. If Lily wasn't done, If Michael wasn't as innocent as I wanted to believe, if the raven wasn't fully on my side, then I was standing in the middle of a game I never agreed to play. A game with no rules, no allies, only shadows. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling as cold wind seeped through the window cracks. Lily's voice, the raven's warning, Michael's unfamiliar expression in the photograph, everything spun around me like a storm with no center. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't just a victim of a cruel daughter-in-law. I was a piece on a chessboard far larger, darker, and more dangerous than anything I imagined. And the most terrifying part was this: the game had only just begun.